Thornwood House, a name whispered in fear, a place avoided at all costs. It stood atop Widow's Hill, a silhouette against the stormy sky. Twisted branches clawed at its rotting walls. Broken windows stared like empty eyes. Legends spoke of a darkness trapped within, a malevolent entity bound to the house. It was said that those who dared enter never left. They were swallowed by the shadows, their souls claimed by the evil within. Michael was never one to back down from a challenge, especially not from Jake, the school bully. Jake's dare hung in the air, heavy with fear and anticipation. Go into Thornwood House, spend the night, prove you're not scared. Michael knew the stories, he had heard the whispers. But something inside him, a potent mix of fear and bravado, pushed him forward. He wouldn't be a coward, not tonight. The old iron gates groaned open, a sound like a dying man's gasp. The rusted metal seemed to resist, as if it were trying to keep out any who dared to enter. The wind howled through the gaps, adding an eerie symphony to the already unsettling atmosphere. The gates had not been opened in years, and their reluctance was palpable. Each step towards the house was heavier than the last, as if the very air grew thick with dread. Michael could feel the weight of countless eyes watching him, though he saw no one. The path was overgrown with weeds, each one seeming to reach out and grab at his ankles, as if trying to pull him back. The house loomed larger with every step, its dark windows like empty eye sockets staring into his soul. The front door creaked open on its own, revealing a gaping maw of darkness. It was as if the house itself was inviting him in, eager to swallow him whole. The hinges screamed in protest, echoing through the empty halls. Michael hesitated, his heart pounding in his chest, but he knew there was no turning back now. The stench hit Michael first, a foul mix of decay and something sickly sweet. It was the smell of death, mingled with the cloying scent of something long forgotten. He covered his nose with his sleeve, but it did little to block out the overpowering odour. The air was thick with it, making it hard to breathe. Dust motes danced in the slivers of moonlight that pierced the gloom. They floated lazily, undisturbed for years until now. The moonlight cast eerie shadows on the walls, making the room seem alive with movement. Michael's eyes struggled to adjust to the dim light, but he could make out the outlines of old furniture, covered in dust and cobwebs. He stepped inside, the floorboards groaning in protest. Each step echoed through the empty house, a reminder of its long abandonment. The wood was old and brittle, threatening to give way under his weight. Michael moved cautiously, afraid that one wrong step would send him crashing through the floor. The door slammed shut behind him. He was trapped. The sound reverberated through the house, sealing his fate. Michael's heart raced as he realized there was no escape. The darkness seemed to close in around him, and he could feel the house watching, waiting. He took a deep breath and steeled himself for whatever lay ahead. Every creak and groan of the old house seemed to whisper his name. The wooden floorboards, aged and worn, creaked under his weight, each step echoing through the empty halls. It was as if the house itself was alive, breathing, and aware of his presence. Shadows danced at the edge of his vision, twisting and contorting into monstrous shapes. The flickering candlelight cast eerie silhouettes on the walls, making the shadows seem almost sentient. They moved with a life of their own, creating an unsettling atmosphere that made his heart race. There was a presence here. He could feel it. It was an intangible force, a weight pressing down on his chest, making it hard to breathe. The air was thick with an unspoken tension, as if the very walls were holding their breath, waiting for something to happen. He wandered through darkened corridors, his hand trailing along damp, cobweb-draped walls. The air grew colder. Each step he took seemed to lead him deeper into the heart of the house, where the darkness was almost palpable. The walls seemed to close in around him, and the silence was deafening. He felt a shiver run down his spine, and it wasn't just from the cold. Something was watching him. He could feel eyes on him, following his every move. The sensation was unnerving, making the hairs on the back of his neck stand on end. He quickened his pace, but the feeling only intensified. He could feel its burning gaze. It was a malevolent presence, lurking just out of sight, waiting for the right moment to strike. The darkness seemed to pulse with a life of its own, and he knew he wasn't alone. The whispering walls held secrets, and he was about to uncover them. He found himself in a large, dusty room. The air was thick with the scent of decay and neglect, as if the room had been sealed off from the world for decades. Cobwebs hung like ghostly curtains from the ceiling, and the floor was littered with debris and broken furniture. Moonlight spilled through a shattered skylight, casting an eerie glow that danced across the room. The light illuminated a heavy, iron-wrought chest in the center of the room, its surface covered in intricate ancient carvings that seemed to tell a story of their own. It pulsed with an unnatural heat, a rhythmic throb that seemed to sync with his own heartbeat. The chest was both mesmerizing and terrifying, drawing him in with an almost magnetic pull. He knew, with a certainty that chilled him to the bone, that this was the heart of the house. This chest held secrets, dark and ancient, that had been buried for centuries. It was as if the house itself was alive, and this chest was its beating heart. This was where the darkness resided. The very air seemed to hum with a malevolent energy, and shadows danced in the corners of the room, as if they were alive. He reached out a trembling hand and placed it on the chest. The metal was cold to the touch, sending a shiver down his spine. Yet beneath the cold exterior, he could feel a pulsating warmth, a sign of the dark power contained within. The metal was ice cold, yet he could feel a malevolent energy radiating from within. It was as if the chest was alive, breathing, waiting for someone to unlock its secrets. A voice, raspy and ancient, echoed in his mind, "Release me." The words sent a chill through his very soul, and he knew that whatever was inside the chest was not of this world. It was something dark, something that had been trapped for a reason. He hesitated, torn between the urge to flee and the compulsion to uncover the truth. The voice grew louder, more insistent, and he felt a strange connection to it, as if it was calling to a part of him he didn't know existed. The room seemed to close in around him, the walls pressing in as the voice continued to echo in his mind. "Release me." The words were a command, a plea and a threat all at once. He took a deep breath, steeling himself for what was to come. Whatever lay within the chest, he knew that opening it would change everything. The heart of the house was calling, and he was powerless to resist. The voice slithered through his thoughts, promising him power beyond his wildest dreams. It spoke of revenge against those who had wronged him. All he had to do was open the chest. It seemed so simple. But another part of him, a tiny flicker of reason, screamed a warning. This was madness, this was the darkness that had claimed so many before him. He had to get out, he had to escape. "Release me!" the voice hissed, its tone laced with desperation and an underlying threat. "And the power shall be yours. Refuse, and you will join the others, trapped here for eternity." The choice was agonizing. Freedom for himself, at the cost of unleashing an unspeakable evil upon the world, or eternal imprisonment within the walls of Thornwood House. He closed his eyes, his heart pounding against his ribs. He made his decision. With a surge of adrenaline-fueled strength, Michael threw open the chest. A blinding light erupted, throwing him back against the wall. He cried out, his voice lost in the cacophony of the house groaning and shuddering around him. The darkness was free.